Alright boys, so Oberon is coming back to the JP version of the game, and I'm getting a lot of questions from a lot of different people asking if they should actually summon on this banner. My short, concise answer, if you're in a big hurry, is yes, you should probably go ahead and snag up Oberon, because this guy is insanely good. He's good for pretty much like anything. He can be your DPS, your support, doesn't matter what setup you're doing. Are you doing arts farming and you just need that little bit of an extra kick? Boom, spam Oberon's third skill. You'll just get right across that finish line. And really, his other skills too will also do it, right? Like everything he does, while he does really want to be a part of buster farming, can really be used in anything, right? Like you can really slap him into any setup and he's going to help you out a lot. The main point of contention for a lot of people is should they summon for Oberon now or wait for the New Year's banner? And I'm just going to tell you right now, before we even discuss all the details of what Oberon does, it is probably the safer option to summon on Oberon's banner because you know how good he is and you know how much of an impact he's going to have on your box, as opposed to, you know, maybe the New Year's servant is like an AoE quick servant, right? Maybe they're a quick looper and you really can't use that. Or maybe they're like a single target buster DPS, right? Like you don't really need that in your account. Maybe that's not a servant you actually need. Whereas you know Oberon is just going to drastically raise the power level of your account. So that's just kind of my take on which banner you should summon on. And if you think that I'm capping or anything, I'm going to be summoning on Oberon myself as well. Even before losing my other JP account because my computer exploded, I was still planning on summoning on that Oberon banner. That was still the plan for me no matter what. But you know what? Maybe you need a little bit of convincing. Well, then let's go ahead and talk about Oberon and all of the things that he actually does. But before we do, if you have not already, make sure you leave a like on the video and you subscribe to the channel for that sweet daily FGO content. Also, I stream every weekday starting at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, so make sure you go peep the Twitch down in the description down below as well. With that being said, let's go ahead and jump right into this. Now, the first thing we need to talk about actually is Oberon's class as a Pretender, because Pretender is still a fairly new class. They've spanned a few other servants into the class, but I'm imagining there's a lot of people that still don't know what it actually does. So basically, they kill alter egos, get killed by foreigners, are good against the knight classes, that is sabers, archers, and lancers, and are weak against the cavalry classes, which are riders, casters, and assassins, and obviously are still strong against berserkers. The reason this is interesting is that it kind of makes them like the opposite of alter egos, kind of, but it also gives them a nice niche against alter egos as well. And so in certain mixed class nodes where there's like, say, sabers and archers, these pretenders are actually really good because usually it'd be like, oh man, I really can't use my Muramasa right now because there's archers here. You can't really loop it. Pretenders don't really care. Where they might care is if there's like a Lancer Assassin node, because they'll do really good against the Lancers but bad against the Assassins. So it'll be kind of up to your judgment, being like, well, there's really only a couple of goon assassins that I'm sure I can clear, and the main boss is a Lancer, so I'm sure I can still take him down. This is especially true in Oberon's case if you're using him as a DPS, because he can really just kind of force his way through nodes because the guy's very, very strong, as we'll get into. But so already the Pretender class is kind of a nice thing to have into your account, especially on an AoE servant, for the same reason that it's just kind of generally nice to have an alter ego, because it gives you some way to deal with some weird mixed class nodes. Now, as far as his hits are concerned, my man is rocking 4 hits on his quick and his arts card. He's got a 6-hit extra attack, which you know we love to see. And well, the buster hits never really matter. I mean, at least he's got his 2 buster cards so he can buster Brave Chain with his own NP. Something to note though is that he has a very high star gen stat at 20.5% with those 4 hit quick cards, meaning that he's going to be able to drop a fair bit of stars around. And you might be thinking, okay, that means I really need to get crits on the arts card. And yeah, that is really nice if you're able to do that. But if you're using Oberon as the DPS, he's going to be able to take care of his own NP generation by himself. Oberon has some very powerful skills when it comes to kind of genning somebody's NP or just genning his own NP. And so while it is really nice to get crits on that arts card, it's actually not mandatory. Before we actually get into the skills, let's also kind of go over some of his passive skills. So he's got the weird like anti-Merlin thing that he's got going on. That's probably like never really going to come up, right? But the 2 interesting ones are that he has like 2 skills that are basically buffing debuff success rate, which is good because he likes to put people to sleep on his NP. And then he's also immune to all mental debuffs. That means Oberon can't be stunned, he can't be put to sleep, can't be charmed, nothing like that. It's actually really, really nice. And it's kind of like a more OP version of like Hassan not being able to be charmed or something like that, right? It's really broken because it basically means Oberon can never be stopped. The only way for an enemy to like not just get blown back by him is to like set up really high defense or just really neuter his attack. And so it makes him really, really, really strong if you choose to use him as a DPS, but also super strong as a support because it means that he's basically always online to give your other people in the party like all of the buffs that he can give them. We've all been there when we have like say a Merlin, a Waver, or a Castoria where it's a crucial part of the fight where you really need that last skill to come off cooldown and then win the fight for you, and then you've gotten stunned or charmed or skill sealed or something along those lines. That's not going to happen with Oberon, right? Because he's just straight up immune to all of that. And again, we haven't even touched any of his skills yet. So starting off with his first skill, this is already a very strong charisma and opening to his kit. He is giving the entire party 30% NP damage for 3 turns, while also charging everybody's NP by 20% on a 5-turn cooldown. This is functionally his charisma, but the reason it's actually kind of broken is A, the NP damage is 30% as opposed to charisma's normal 20% attack buff, and B, the fact that it is an NP damage buff. Consider the fact that not a lot of servants or even other supports are giving you NP damage buffs, right? You have someone like Waver who's giving you an attack buff and defense down on the enemy on his own NP. Merlin is giving you a card buff and an attack buff. Castoria is giving you a attack buff, a card buff, and a special damage mod, but none of them are really giving you NP damage buffs. Really, the only one that comes to mind off the top of my head is Tamamo, and that's kind of why she's actually still pretty relevant, because she gives you that big NP damage buff that multiplies into the card buff that she gives you and pairs really nicely with the other supports, because different buff types in FGO are actually really strong. Because they don't actually add into each other, they multiply into each other. So Oberon is contributing more damage than you might think when you throw him into a party with, say, like Tamamovich or someone like Castoria or just Merlin even though the fact that they don't like to be together. It is like subtly really, really strong because it's not only just a strong charisma in general, but it's just good because of how it's going to interact with other parties. And obviously the 20% NP gauge is really strong because it doesn't matter if you're using him as a support or as a DPS. If he's a DPS, that's getting him closer to his own NP, and he's also charging his support's NPs as well. So that way they can help him kind of just continue to do more damage and help him stay in the fight even longer. So first skill is already a very, very strong introduction. The second skill is really strong. It's a little bit sussy, but it does end up working out. So basically, he has a targetable 50% battery that also bombs 20 stars. But you have to remember that after the turn that this is granted to them, he's going to then take 20% of their NP back. So it's a little bit weird, but basically, it's a 50% battery. Like in practice, it's 50%. You just got to keep track of like, oh, the fact that you're going to have 20 robbed from you next turn. But then, like, if you're doing a challenge quest and you don't, like, have your other guys, like, dump it all into Oberon, it really doesn't matter, right? Like, you can kind of time this pretty well. And generally, if you're doing stuff like Buster farming, or even if you're throwing him into, like, say, an arts team or something, because your arts team really just needs that last little bit of damage to push through the final node or something, it generally is not going to matter a whole lot, because it's either going to try to take the 20% after you've already won, or you could just time it again if you're using it with like a DPS to not have everybody give them more NP after they get it stolen. And even worst case scenario, he basically gives that 20% back to them on his first skill anyway. So that's why I'm like, yeah, it's still basically a 50%, because even if he takes it away from them, he gives it back on the first skill. So you still net 50%, which is insane. It's like the whole reason that people like Scotty were really, really dummy broken, because they could give somebody 50% gauge. And the 20 stars is just a nice like icing on the cake. There's not really a whole lot else to ironically say about it though, because it's just so generically good. It's just such a good thing that he's able to do that there's not a whole lot of reason for me to like go into more detail about it. It's just a very good thing to be able to give anyone. Just screw it, 50% battery, here, take it. You know, it's just broken. Especially because I want to talk about the third skill. So the third skill, I know there's a lot of text on here. It looks a little scary, but I will water it down for you. Basically, he's going to give somebody a 50% buster buff and then a 100% buff to their NP damage. Remember that he's also already doing that on his first skill. And so he is massively gassing up how big of a buff that actually is. But then after this turn, that servant basically becomes useless. You can't swap them out, you can't sacrifice them, you can't like cleanse the weird like sleep eternal thing that he's given to them, right? Like you can't do anything like that. Then after that turn, they're slapped with a 3-turn taunt, and basically they're just kind of a meat shield, which even then isn't all that bad, because if you're using this for farming, it doesn't matter, just use this on your 3rd wave, where you're going to want all that massive damage anyway, and just blow the enemy's back out, and then, oh no, my guy went to bed, but I've already cleared the node. Or if you're using Oberon as a support for, say, a more difficult quest, use this whenever you want to kind of get the heat off of your supports, or say even Oberon himself, and maybe transition to using Oberon as your main DPS, because you're like, all right, here you go, I don't know, Sigurd, here you go, here's a big buff, do some damage, and then just sit there for 3 turns and keep the heat off of me while I kind of start getting some free turns for cooldown. There's very interesting things that you can use and kind of interact with a seemingly, I don't know, useless servant. The fact that he has like the 3 turns of taunt on them kind of fixes it out a little bit, because it's like, oh, it's also like buying me 3 turns, like 3 free turns, which is almost invaluable for something like FGO, because that's 3 turns of free cooldown and 3 turns of you taking no damage, as long as the enemies don't have like an AoE. Then it kind of becomes a little bit more useless. But like everything this guy is doing is dummy broken, and this even extends to his NP. It's an AoE Buster NP, which is why you can use him as the Buster Farmer or the Buster Support type guy. It's also the same reason that like Koyenskaya is really good, because even if you don't have like the prime Koyenskaya setup, Koyenskaya can be one of the servants to take out a node for you because of her AoE NP. Like you can just use her to take out wave 1. Similar things can be done with someone like Oberon, but even this NP is still pretty good because he's able to yeet all of the enemy's offensive buffs, and then he puts them all to bed for 1 turn, which if you don't remember what the asleep status does, basically it's like a stun, but if you attack them, they wake up. So like, you kind of need to make sure that you don't like hit the people right after you put them to sleep, but obviously someone's going to get hit unless you have like 2 support NPs following Oberon's NP. So kind of just keep your targeting in order, or just don't care about it, right? Just follow it up with like another Pierce Invincibility NP and you're good to go, because Oberon does, after he does all this damage, he does actually give the entire enemy party invincibility. So the kind of like drawback is that, yeah, he basically does like an AoE guaranteed stun, but then he also gives them all invincibility. So unless you have Pierce Invincibility to follow up his NP, you're not really doing anything. The good thing though is that he also is doing special damage against lawful alignment people, which is quite a lot of servants, especially when you consider the fact that he is a pretender and he can actually hit a lot of these guys. Not only for their special damage mod, but also just for like class advantage, which is just, again, really dummy broken. And if it sounds like I've been really trying to sell this guy for the entire video, I am. I'm really trying to sell him because nodes are getting harder and harder over on JP, and it's making more and more people realize how good this guy actually is. And I don't want to say how necessary he is, because there are ways to clear these really difficult nodes if you have like the specific servant setup required. But someone like Oberon just makes it a whole lot easier, especially with someone like Koyenskaya, where they don't really care about looping their NP. It's more about just brute forcing your way through nodes, which is a lot easier when you have someone like Oberon who gives you like a big buster buff and then just gasses up your NP damage to absurd levels, and you're doing like special damage mod levels of damage outside of events where there are no special damage mods. It's really insane. So again, if you're sitting on the JP version of the game, or if you're looking at like this situation for global, and you're trying to think like 2 years ahead, I would still recommend going for Oberon over the New Year's banner. I think it's very unlikely that whoever they drop for New Year's is going to be more impactful than Oberon, because usually the New Year's servant is just a really solid, good servant, right? Like Yang is like really good, Hokusai is pretty good, Muramasa is really good, Koyenskaya, pretty good. But none of them are like game warpingly good in the same way that Oberon is. And so that's why if you want more bang for your buck, or you want to go for the safer option, you definitely go for Oberon. Although, I don't know, maybe Lysenko will make me eat my words and they're going to drop like Castoria 2.0, and then I'm just wrong for some reason. But let me know how your polls go for Oberon down in the comments down below. Let me know if this video was a catalyst for you to get him, or just let me know if you're really adamantly going to save for New Year's And you know what? You may be correct. They might just drop Castoria 2.0, and I might gotta just sit here with my L. Although, then again, they might try to drop Castoria 2.0, and then it really ends up being like Castoria 1.5, and Oberon is still better or something. Who knows? They're obviously cooking up something really impressive over there because they're not dropping any new servants for the rest of the year. And so they're obviously cooking up something. What are they cooking? Who knows? But I'm excited to find out, and I'm excited to summon for Oberon in the next couple of days. I'll catch you guys in the next video. Make sure you have a good rest of your day, and I'm out. Peace late, guys.